Okay, we're recording now.
Perfect. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and actually good morning to Laura D'Alessandro, who's joining us today from the West Coast. I am Jess Goyasso, a program officer at LISC Philadelphia, leading our community economic development team. I want to thank you all for joining us today. The FOC BCO Regional Network was created in 2021 by program officers in the Northeast region to respond to a number of needs and general feedback of our Northeast FOC partners in a way that is nimble and contextualized to some of the issues in our region. Our hope is that these convenings are forums for learning and networking. And so on that note, I'm happy to get into today's programming. Our national FOC network is possible due to the leadership and management provided by the Family Income and Wealth Building team, led by our two guests today, Katrin Kark and Laura D'Alessandro. And before I kick off to presenting to them, I just want to go over some general housekeeping. I ask that everyone use the chat function to drop your organization and city right now. Also, if you'd like to just drop a helpful link, maybe a podcast you've been listening to, a book you've been reading, a tool that you've found that has been helpful for your work personally, professionally, you can do that at this moment. I also ask that you use the chat to ask questions, share affirmations, tell us your thoughts throughout the presentation. And we will be having a Q&A. I'll flip to the agenda in a second. If you could come off of mute during that time and share your thoughts with your colleagues, we would greatly appreciate it. And also throughout, let us know if you'll be attending the FOC National Convening October 11th through the 13th in Indianapolis. Something we're very excited to return to is in-person network meetings. And so I would be grateful to see you all there. Now that we're through the welcomes, I will introduce our presenters. Like I said, we have Laura D'Alessandro from Family Income and Wealth Building, as well as Katrin Kark from Family Income and Wealth Building. Taylor would be dropping a chat right now to their biographies and the FOC-network.org website that they've created and is one of my favorite resources here at LISC. I think it's one of our best websites, really. So without further ado, I will hand over the speaking role. Laura, Katrin, thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you, Jess, and thank you for having us. We are really pleased to be here, and we're excited when you asked us. We have loved the East Coast Network. I used to be in New York, so I used to come down and visit much more often, and we've seen some wonderful, exciting innovations coming out of your regional area. And so it was just really lovely to be able to come and chat with you all. I'm going to go ahead and is it okay if I share my screen? We have a PowerPoint that we are going to use.
Yep, Silvana will share screen permissions, make you all presenters.
Great. I think I'm just going to hit share screen and see what happens.
Yeah, it should be fine. Let me know.
All right. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Great. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off. My name is Laura D'Alessandro. I am the co-director, as Jess mentioned, of Family Income and Wealth Building, with my wonderful colleague Katrin, who will jump in a moment. I lead up our financial health work, and as you all know, financial health cannot be successful without wealth building and income building, and Katrin is really focused on the workforce side, but because of our integrated approach, we work very closely together. And today what we thought we would do, and I thought I got all of these transitions off, but sorry if we have lots of transitions. What we thought we would do is talk a little bit about where our network has been, where we started, and then get us to where we're going, because I think you can't talk about the story of the Financial Opportunity Center work without recognizing all of the wonderful things that have happened before us. And I will share that this is something that has grown, changed, and expanded over time. And we continue to grow, change, and expand, oftentimes, and most of the time, led by initiatives that are coming out of local partners or networks. And we're going to have, Katrin and I will go through this, where we've been, where we're going, and then we're going to open it up for discussion because we really would like to hear from you. I can't say this enough, but our biggest strength as a network is our partners. And what we are able to do is because of what we learn with you, what we're seeing on the field, what you in the field, and what you all are lifting up as your priorities. And so it's very important for us to continue that conversation, and to say, like, the secret sauce is our partners and all of the wonderful work you're doing. So, this is gonna drive me crazy. So where we started, it was 20 years ago that we started. It's a little bit crazy. And this, our journey began in 2004, but it actually really began in 1999 when LISC switched to quality of life planning and building sustainable communities. But really in 2004, we were working in Chicago with some workforce development partners that were very focused on getting people into jobs. And what we noticed in those initial days was that these workforce development agencies were very, very good at getting people into jobs, but the jobs were minimum wage. And oftentimes somebody would come in and get a minimum wage job. It wouldn't pay for their expenses, and they would cycle through. They would quit their job. They'd have maybe a minor financial emergency, or their car would break down, or they just fell further behind each month and work really didn't pay. A job was not enough for them. And we saw folks cycle in about every 3 months. And for workforce development at that time, that actually was okay because they could check a box that somebody had been placed and met the 3-month retention milestone, but we weren't seeing long-term impact with our partners. And so we looked around at that point for different models of something that was more comprehensive. And we found a model that Annie Casey Foundation had started that really is the precursor to our Financial Opportunity Center model as it is today. And it was called the Center for Working Families. And that was the initial integrated services approach. It had financial coaching, employment services, and income supports. Financial coaching was not coaching as we see it today. It was a little bit more closer on that continuum to financial counseling than coaching. Our view of coaching has changed over time. But it was our first integrated approach, and we launched that with 4 initial sites. A little fun fact about our network is that in those initial sites, we actually have 2 staff members that are still at LISC that worked in those initial sites, and they joined maybe in 2005, 2006, but many of you may know Sung Kim, who is now our SVP of National Programs. She was an initial financial coach. Jennifer McLean, who was in Chicago, also came from one of the very first financial opportunity centers. So we launched in 2004 with 4 partners, and just to see if it would work and to understand if this integrated approach would be successful. Slowly, we started to expand, and we saw initial success in Chicago. And so we moved into additional cities. We went to Twin Cities, Detroit, and Indianapolis, and we expanded out this model to additional partners. This was largely workforce development driven at this point, although we were starting to add in some social service agencies as well. And in Chicago, we were starting to emphasize homeownership at this point. Back in, I don't know how many of you folks were doing this type of work way back in 2010, but back at that point, there weren't a lot of data systems. A lot of folks were using Excel to track data. And so we found that we needed to create a data system. So our first data system was built around 2010 as we continued to expand, and we got up to about 23 partners at that point. We worked with financial coaches in Chicago and launched our very first financial product, which is Twin Accounts, because there were no other financial products for credit building at that time. And then in 2011, we got a shot in the arm. And Philadelphia and benefited from this, as did, I think, Rhode Island. But we were able to expand very quickly because we received a 5-year award from the Social Innovation Fund, which was a federal grant that included an evaluation of the program. And through that award, we funded 47 sites with federal money, but we also were able to raise a lot of private money to launch other networks. And that's where we really got our first big scaling push. And we went up to about 70 sites at that point. And this investment allowed us to really think about what parts of our model were working well, where we wanted to expand, where we wanted to deepen our impact. And so during this time, we leaned into the credit as an asset approach, which continues to be very important. We started to explore financial coaching. We brought on some initial training from CNM to do our financial coaching training more broadly. And we started to really solidify how we onboarded new sites. And the evaluation actually allowed us to take a hard look at our program, and that led to our next phase. But during this period, 2011 to about 2016, our initial wages, when we were placing people in jobs, they hovered at about $10.25 an hour for 5 years, which was not a good thing. We recognized that. And so we decided at that point, not at 2016, but we started to do some pilot programs to see what we could do to increase starting wages. And our initial pilot programs evolved to the launch of Bridges to Career Opportunities, which was an initiative of the Financial Opportunity Centers that focused on career pathways and creating on-ramps into training for folks who were coming in the doors of the Financial Opportunity Centers. We got another Social Innovation Fund award that allowed us to expand that work. And so we continue to add in new partners, some focused more on bridges, but really still using the foundation of the Financial Opportunity Center model. And in 2016, we had about 90 partners. Over the last years, we have continued this work. We've continued to expand. We're now at over 130 partners around the country. And we are doing multiple variations of the model, and Katrin's going to talk a little bit more about where we're headed. But that really got us to today. Every one of our innovations, the addition of twin accounts or credit as an asset or focused on bridges, really was done in partnership with local sites. So when we were looking at our stagnant wages, when we were looking at that, we worked with our partners. We had, I don't know if any of you know Instituto out of Chicago, who came on and was a real proponent for some career pathways work and helped us to develop Bridges to Career Opportunities. So as we've moved along, we have been engaging and understanding and learning and trying to find what works in markets and make it work for more partners. Really, that has been probably one of our key points that we've taken forward. And as I mentioned, we had some priorities. Our priorities changed over time. We deepened our coaching approach that is continuing to evolve. As many of you know, we now are looking at coaching, employment coaching. We're looking at coaching for supervisors. We are trying to embed the coaching approach all throughout financial opportunity centers. So that has now gone from just being financial coaching over here to being integral and foundational to the entire program. Another key component, which I know you are all proponents of, is digital skilling. And now this is probably a little bit more recent than maybe the coaching approach, but digital skilling is now seen as something that is important across all legs of our stool and is incorporated into employment, financial, and income supports. But really, for some sites, we've been able to embed navigators. We've built in some workshops, digital skilling workshops, but understanding that expanding digital skills is core to our work. And then we also have continued to deepen our relationship with data and trying to use our data, just not for reporting, not to check a box, but also to improve our program, find some trends, see what's happening. We can see in our data that rent has increased exponentially over the last 3 years. You know, we are looking at all of these trends to understand what we need to do as a program to better meet our clients where they are, better support the clients on their journey to financial health, and to find ways that we can bring in larger solutions or push even on systems a little bit to improve financial outcomes and career outcomes. So that gets us to today. And this is, that first little graphic I had was just the 3 services thrown together. We now think of our Financial Opportunity Center approach really as this integration between the 3 services. And it's really developed over time to expand and include not just financial coaching, but overall financial health. And we really understand the interplay of each of these services together. You cannot talk about employment without talking about the benefits cliff. You cannot talk about expenses without also thinking about income. So we see these as 3 services that need to be delivered together in order for long-term change in people's lives. This is all predicated on the one-on-one coaching. So workshops are wonderful, but the one-on-one coaching is where we see real change happen. And that's what we promote for all of these services. And also that we are using data to understand how things are going and how we can improve. I'm sure that in another year, we'll have another graphic that will be even more complicated. It seems like as we go, we kind of pick up that we understand things more deeply and we expand our understanding of the model. So and just so you know, before I'm going to turn it over to Katrin on the next slide, but just where are we at? Right now, we are serving roughly 20 to 25,000 people every year. That's varied over COVID. It's gone up above 25,000 in 2021. We actually had a dip in 22 of numbers served. And that is something that we've seen sort of go up and down over time. Although the number of services tends to stay typically around the same. So we're seeing that people are coming back more often. As they have more emergent needs. Our network is serving largely women. That's gone up and down too. We were at 57%. I think in more recent times, it's gone up to 65. 80% are from Black, Indigenous, or persons of color communities. And that is intentional with the partners that we select to work with. We are looking to work in communities specifically that have had wealth stripped from them or have not benefited from systems or systems are not designed for certain communities, as we know. And so that is intentional in how we design our program. We've also expanded our rural program as well over the years, and we have a much broader rural program. So we're not just focused in urban cores, but the rural program has expanded. So that's where we are. I'm going to flip the next slide and turn it over to Katrin to take us forward.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. And thanks again to Jess and the rest of my LISC colleagues for inviting us to join you all this afternoon. Thanks to everyone who hopped on. It's been really great to connect with the folks in our FOC network, both virtually and especially looking ahead this year to have opportunities to do that in person. We've just started in the past few months to get back to some traveling and some visiting with our partners, and we'll see folks, as Laura mentioned, at the FOC National Conference in October. So I think everyone did a really great job of pivoting and flipping to virtual work during the pandemic. But yeah, it's just been really nice to get to see folks in person again, but still be able to keep up some of these virtual connections. So now with that said, I'm just going to share a few things about where we're headed, which, in some ways with what's on these slides, we are kind of already here in our network across the FOC and Bridges network, and planning and hoping to really strengthen these strands of work and do more in these areas. So kind of 3 of those examples are the sector-based training. So, again, kind of continuing to support our Bridges work, really working with our partners to figure out, what are the right career pathways in your markets, what career pathways are in demand, as well as a good fit for your community members that you work with, and can also provide a living wage, opportunities for advancement, and those facets of a quality job that are so important. Kind of that one of those other lanes that Laura also touched on is wealth building. So again, really sort of refining and expanding our strategy for access to safe financial products, and focusing both on short and long-term asset building. And that third lane, the digital skilling, again, this is something that we've actually been working on with our Financial Opportunity Center network for a number of years, going way back to some years ago when Chicago LISC started doing some digital skilling and some community connectivity work under the broadband technology opportunities federal funding. I think that was about 10 plus years ago. And since then, we have partnered with, again, about 8 years ago or so, corporate partners like Accenture to develop some curriculum for us and give folks access to the Accenture Learning Exchange. And over the past few years, really kind of doubling down on this after when the pandemic hit and the need for digital skills and digital access became even more crucial. We've been able to support our partners to incorporate digital literacy and digital skilling into their FOC work. And I know, especially early on in the pandemic, a lot of our Financial Opportunity Center partners played a critical role in helping to distribute devices to folks, whether that was giving people devices or setting up like a kind of a lending library so people could access devices to continue job training or education at home when things shifted to virtual. And so we're continuing to support and expand that digital skilling work. We really see sort of a continuum of types of digital skilling programming that could go from some of that sort of early stage getting people, making sure people are connected to the internet and have a device at home, sort of that access and adoption piece. Then, moving on to some of the real sort of digital literacy skilling and coaching and navigation, helping folks acquire digital skills and also apply those digital skills to the job search process, to navigating, online banking and personal finance management, sort of building digital skills that they can use in the workplace to get jobs and be successful and move ahead in their jobs. And then kind of that third step on the continuum is expanding into some tech-focused bridge programs and career pathways that I think a couple of our markets on this call are going to be exploring this year and in the future. And then on the next slide, thank you, Laura. Again, some of the specific pathways that we're looking at in our sector-based training focus for bridges. We typically across the network have had a strong focus and concentration on healthcare-related pathways. That's not necessarily going to go away. That's certainly healthcare is a huge sector. There's a lot of demand for those jobs. A lot of healthcare jobs are also not the kind of jobs that can easily be offshored or easily be sort of supplanted by robots or AI or what have you. So that will remain most likely a focus in our Bridges network. But we also want to make sure that we are supporting our partners to look at what some of the newer pathways are, sort of, have diversity of career pathways offerings to, to meet the needs of your community residents and kind of figure out where there might be opportunities for living wage jobs and career growth in some newer pathways. And I think definitely, the pandemic prompted maybe some shifts and some re-envisioning in career pathways. And I think also, as many of you have probably seen, sort of prompted a lot of people to kind of rethink what types of jobs they wanted, what types of working conditions they might want. I think there's much more awareness of the possibility of a hybrid work situation and people sort of maybe getting a taste of that in the pandemic when their job shut down and wanting to continue that for their careers. And I know we hear sometimes that it's harder to recruit folks for kind of the traditional, 5-day a week in office type of jobs. And so I think we're definitely really kind of looking to see what the right pathways are in our markets that can kind of help both meet employer demand as well as job seeker needs. And finally, I think another area where we're hoping to expand is in green jobs. So, whether that's solar panel installation, weatherization, I think that can look different in different markets. And folks may have heard in other sessions about all the great work that Boston has been doing with their Bridges to Green Jobs program. We're excited. We got some funding to be able to expand that work in New Jersey and in Detroit. So we're really excited for the potential to do that. And for those of us who have been around this work for a long time, I think some of us remember a moment back, like I think 2009 or thereabouts, when there was some momentum around green jobs, maybe didn't necessarily provide the types of quality jobs that folks were hoping. But I think we're at another exciting moment where there is even more of an imperative for green jobs due to the climate crisis. And I think there's going to be both state and federal funding for energy efficiency, solar, all sorts of things in that green job sector that I think kind of make this moment a little bit more expansive and have more potential for some green jobs work compared to in the past. So yeah, again, definitely, if folks haven't had a chance to hear from Silvana and her FOC partners in Boston about the Boston Bridges to Green Jobs, I'm sure they'd be happy to share more about that. They've really led the way in kind of piloting a really innovative program in Boston that we're excited to work with some other markets to kind of adapt and figure out how that can work in different geographies. Next slide. Thanks, Laura. And yeah, just to go into a little more depth on the wealth building, like I mentioned, we are really looking at ways to focus both on short-term savings as well as midterm and longer-term wealth building. Home ownership is and has been a key wealth building vehicle for a lot of folks. And that remains a part of our wealth building strategy. I think we're definitely in a point in time where in most markets, there's a lot of challenges to home ownership, just the way the housing market is and housing prices are currently, that it may be less accessible than it has been in the past. And so we definitely acknowledge that wealth building is bigger than just home ownership. And we are continuing to kind of sort of build our strategy to help FOCs figure out, kind of how to work with folks along that whole continuum of wealth building and types of savings. And then I think the next slide, I probably talked a little bit about already when I touched on digital skilling, but again, that spectrum of connectivity, device access, the digital skills training, and really not just digital literacy training or workshops, but kind of that ongoing coaching to help folks put those skills into practice and kind of refine and get really confident with those skills. I think a lot of us probably have an experience of helping maybe a relative or a friend figure something out with technology. And I often find when I've done that for folks in my family, it's, if they don't have a chance to practice it, then they don't get confident, and 6 months later they're needing help navigating with the same thing. So really kind of taking a page from the financial coaching and the employment coaching that's been so central to our FOC model, this concept of digital coaching really focuses on again, not just teaching skills, but kind of helping people practice and build their confidence with those digital skills. And I'll just say a few things about some additional continuing innovations and expansions. Again, I think this sort of interlocks a little bit with some of what I touched on before, but we have heard a lot of interest in our FOC network about connections between entrepreneurship and financial coaching, particularly, to be able to provide an alternative pathway to folks who are interested in entrepreneurship rather than kind of a traditional employment type of situation. I think we've found in many cases, and Laura, I know this is your area of expertise, so feel free to jump in if I'm if I'm leaving something out or paraphrasing this badly. But I think we've often found that the FOCs are in a really unique place to be able to coach people who are micro entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, sort of more at that early stage of entrepreneurship where they really, want to kind of get the foundation of their personal finances solid as they start to think about how to grow their business to then get to the stage where they might, start to go to a more specialized small business development center or access, small business loans or kind of that realm of small business capital. But I think we've definitely seen a lot of success in sort of using the FOC model to work with folks on the financial coaching when they're in the early stage of their entrepreneurship journey. Second, we're also looking at places where it might make sense to build capacity of FOC coaches around housing and home ownership. So whether that's starting the conversation with financial coaching or employment coaching clients about their housing goals or their housing stability or their housing situation. In some cases, I know we have a lot of FOCs that are also HUD certified housing counseling agencies. In some cases, that type of training and capacity building may be helpful for some of our FOC partners. But I think, even if somebody isn't necessarily at the stage where they're ready to buy a home or for whatever reason, I think we want to, help support our partners to be comfortable in at least starting that conversation about housing related goals with FOC participants. Even if someone isn't necessarily kind of at the level of technical expertise of something like a HUD certified housing counselor. I know that's a whole other sort of study path and exam, and it can get pretty specific and technical. And again, kind of looking more broadly than just home ownership and really, knowing that especially in today's market, home ownership might be a long path, but there are a lot of things leading up to that that contribute to being able to buy a home eventually. So, having stable rental housing is really crucial. Building credit, building savings, having stable income. Those are all kind of the building blocks for home ownership ultimately, even if someone's personal circumstances or market conditions make that difficult in the short term. And I think we've really seen, that there's a lot more awareness in the field about the importance of housing stability and home ownership. And one of the things that we try to message about the FOC work when we talk to funders or other external partners is that, even if an organization isn't necessarily home ownership focused or a HUD certified housing counseling agency, or if, external funders and partners aren't necessarily thinking about our financial opportunity center network as having a connection to a home ownership strategy. I think we've been really trying to emphasize, like, look, everything that the FOCs do, so, building savings, building credit, helping people find employment, grow in their employment, stabilize in their employment, advance in their wages or on their career path. Those things are all the fundamental building blocks for being able to buy a home and successfully, kind of sustain home ownership, regardless of whether or not that is the person's primary goal when they walk in the door, or regardless of whether or not the FOC is sort of a, quote unquote, home ownership organization as such. Everything that our work does kind of feeds into housing stability and home ownership. And I think sometimes that's not always the way that folks externally are thinking about the work. So we've been trying to really kind of help make those connections for folks when we talk about the FOC network to external partners. Green jobs, I talked a little bit about that. So in the interest of time, because I want to make sure we have time for questions and discussions, I won't say too much more. Behavioral science, we have been for a number of years working on behavioral science innovations and kind of, incorporating some of those principles into the FOC work and the coaching. The ARC tool that many of you use is one example of a behavioral science informed project in a way to both kind of streamline the intake process as well as kind of jumpstart coaching conversations and kind of build in things that will help encourage participant interest and retention in the coaching process. And yes, we could probably talk a lot more about behavioral science for a whole hour, but I will leave it at that for now in the interest of time. And then finally, like I mentioned, the financial products continuum. really kind of thinking about what the right financial products are for your participants at various stages of their savings and asset building cycle, whether that's short term, whether that's midterm, long term. Definitely, we like Laura mentioned earlier, we acknowledge that this is in terms of the economy, sort of a bit of a challenging time. I mean, we've seen that inflation has taken a bite out of people's budgets. We've seen that folks have had to dip into their savings to compensate for inflation and rising prices. In some ways, it's a testament to how important the FOC work has been and all the good work that you've done, that we've seen a lot of FOC clients that had savings to tap into, when prices rose and things got a little bit more challenging. But I think, that's something that we're definitely all navigating in kind of the somewhat uncertain economic moment that we're in now. And next slide, I think that's the final slide. Yes, that is the final slide. So yeah, again, thanks everyone for having us on, and yeah, definitely would love to hear from all of you and answer any questions, as well as just love to hear some of what you're seeing in your communities, or things that we should be thinking about that we haven't talked about. Again, like Laura said, we really, I think, true to LISC's mission, our work is locally driven, so we want to be responsive to your needs and what you're seeing in your communities and how we collectively can support that.
Thank you, Katrin and Laura. I do want to invite folks to come off of mute and ask any questions of our presenters or the group in general. I didn't see any come through the chat, but I will leave the mic open for a few seconds and let people gather their thoughts.
We have a couple of questions. If there are no questions on what we presented, which was information heavy, we have a couple of questions we'd love to throw out for a general open conversation with the group too.
Great, we'd love that.
I'll give it a second. Okay, well, I'm going to assume that there are no questions. Feel free to unmute though, if you are. I think maybe we could just start with if people could write into the chat on a scale of 1 to 10, what we outlined as some of our priorities that aligns 100% with where you're going, or 1, you're going in a totally different direction. Can you just write in the chat 10? Everything we talked about aligns, or 1 doesn't align at all, or somewhere in the middle, and just to get everybody thinking about that before we ask the questions. So again, just in the chat, 1 to 10. If we can see 10, this is exactly it. 1, this is not it at all. Oh. Wow, okay, this is great. I was expecting like a little, Adalberto, I see you popped off mute. Yeah.
How you doing? I'm sorry I got, I arrived late, so I just was enjoying the last couple slides. To me, that's the reason I think I kind of couldn't 10, because it's very relied in what we do here, JPS Boston. I have one of the questions, if you don't mind. I would like to know more about if any status of any program for like savings, like twin accounts or something like that. Have you guys working or thinking about it? What would be the next step? Because we ended last year about the twin accounts, and I would like to know more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I can. So twin accounts was such a good product, and people loved it. I want to just share one really quick point. Is we ran twin accounts for roughly a decade, and at most we had about well, in our biggest year, we had about 500 people sign up, but typically only 300 people used it every year. So the use was pretty low. So what we decided to do was to think about financial products a little bit differently. And we ran a community of practice last year. We had Michael Andelman, I don't know if he's on, he was a member from Boston. He joined us. We had 20 different folks from around the country who volunteered to be part of the community of practice, talking specifically about financial products. And we were in a place where we were doing a one size fits all. The financial product that was available was twin accounts. If a 12-month, $25 product didn't work for you, we didn't have anything. So we decided to step back and look at doing a continuum of products and put together a toolkit on how to begin thinking about which products are better for which client. And if you guys have been on some of the webinars, we've worked with Christy Baker and Vanessa Lindley on personas. The toolkit's coming out in a little bit, but what we're piloting is creating partnerships with local credit unions and banks to offer twin accounts, initial savings, and that type of thing. So it's not an all-in on one product, which is what we are doing, and only reaching 300 to 500 people, but a variety of products that is more tailored to the need of each organization. So a refugee serving organization is going to need very different products than maybe a group that's working on, or maybe a JVS that's getting people into career pathways. So that's the intention that's happening. The toolkit's being released in May, and then we'll be doing some pilots in different cities to really build out this continuum.
That's great. Thanks for the status of the project. I now that we're talking about the programs to help folks to build these assets and different ways to improve their financial well-being. I just want to mention that we just started a pilot with one of an organization. It's called the Second Chance Cards. I don't know, have you heard from them? I'm going to put in the chat the link of the organization. This is an organization that provides cards, and the way that it's kind of the model is that some partner, in this case JBS, need to pay kind of fee for being enrolled in the program. But as soon as the client has been enrolled in the program, they need to pay like for 12 months, $900, like kind of $75, that through a credit union, and that helps folks to build credit and also to pay the card that they get it. So it's very interesting model, and again, it's just a pilot. We just got the first client this week actually, but it's make me kind of interesting to thinking in different ways or different resources that we can provide at some points clients. But again, the tricky part is the fee that we need to pay for the client. We have access here because we have a grant for a specific program that help us to pay for that particular focus of that particular group, very small group, the amount, but it's not like we have to have all the FOC clients, and it's just only very, very few folks that could be enrolled in that program. But it's another way that to help folks to get the card and also help them to build a credit. And I just want to kind of share with you guys as well that we're talking about these kind of different programs and different options that we can provide to our clients. Anyway, I'm going to share anyway the link.
I appreciate it. Thank you for it. Sounds like a really interesting product. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto. We appreciate that. Okay, I see that in the link in the chat, secondchancecars.com. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any additional questions coming in through the chat. Don't see anybody coming off of mute. And so I want to say thank you to our presenters. Thank you for joining us and your continued leadership. I know that we all really appreciate it. Thank you for all of our participants as well. Glad you could make time for us and join us today. As a reminder, our next and last session for this spring series will be April 13th, 10 to 11:30 a.m., our regular slot. And that will be on data for development. And so we will have another member of the Family Income and Wealth Building team, Jackie Guzman, joining us. And I want to encourage folks to invite your fundraisers, leadership, board members, anyone that's invested in leveraging the efforts of your FOCs. So that is April 13th, and Claudia has dropped that information in the chat for you all. You should have it on your calendars. And as a reminder, these sessions are being recorded. We're still figuring out where we are going to have them live, but in the interim, if anybody has a request to receive the recording to share with their teams, you can ask your program officer and we'd be happy to share it just via email. But we will let you know where they will live permanently if it's not just through an email link. And as a final reminder, I want to also just mention again, October 11th through the 13th, we would be happy to meet you all in Indianapolis for our national FOC convening, our first time meeting in person since 2019, probably. And yes, you will receive the slide deck in a follow-up email and perhaps even the recording without having to ask. But if you would like to receive the recording and that does not come, we can share that with you. So 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Thank you all again for attending. I'm going to close out this session. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
everyone.